got that fire. Young Kirk, he got that fire. Grind all day and I never get tired. That fire, that fire, that fire. Little homie, you ain't got that fire. Young Kirk, he got that fire. Grind all day and I never get tired. That fire, that fire, that fire.
Hi everyone, my name is Tuli and I am an intern property broker at Lou Geffen Sotheby's International Realty. East London and the Eastern Cape are great places to live and work, which is why I have chosen to call this beautiful province home. Real estate is a passion for me, and with my extensive knowledge of East London, it is easy to see why young professionals have turned to me for their real estate needs. My enthusiastic, can-do attitude and caring nature is ideal for identifying clients' desires and skillfully guiding them to fulfill their real estate goals. In my 3 years of being a real estate agent, I have built a solid foundation of clients in the Eastern Cape community through my professionalism, attention to detail, and commitment to always put my clients' needs first. I specialize in the sale of residential property in the following East London areas: Beacon Bay, Blue Bend, Bonza Bay, Abbotsford, Dorchester Heights, and Nahoon Valley Park.
Okay. And so let's say someone that gets approved for 2 million. What do most property buyers do? Do they use the full amount that they qualify for, or do you find that people are qualifying for 2 million and only spending $1 million?
It honestly depends on the condition of the house that they're looking at.
Okay.
So if a person has been pre-approved for 2 million, they usually look at their affordability, if they'll be able to pay off the bond. So if a person gets approved for 2 million, they'll start looking from around 1.750 upwards. And then the threshold, because there's always room for negotiation, they can look up to around 2.2. And then it's always the agent's duty to negotiate for the buyer. So if a buyer views a property for 2.2 and they've been pre-approved for 2 million, the agent uses the pre-approval as leverage to negotiate with the seller and say, Mr. Seller, we have a serious buyer here who has put in an offer, please consider it. And we just have to wait to see what the outcome is from the seller.
Okay, makes sense. In terms of then now, the offer to purchase, when should one commit to an offer to purchase? And my understanding is that once you have committed, there is no turning back.
Absolutely. So what would happen is you receive your pre-approval, then you go to the agent and you say, okay, I've been approved for X amount. Then what I usually do is I communicate via WhatsApp with my clients, and I proceed to send them links to properties. So upon receiving the link and having a look through all the property details and the photos, then a client will let me know whether they'd like to view it or not. So if they'd like to view it, then I'll obviously make an appointment to view the property. Now, in the property industry, you've got to be on your ball 24/7. So as soon as a client says they want to view, you always try and schedule it for the same day or the morning thereafter, because you never know when another agent is going to come in and get an offer. So you have to work very fast. Once an appointment has been scheduled, then I would take the clients through to view, right? So they'll view the property and I'll tell them everything. If it's an apartment or townhouse, I need to disclose the levies amount and the rates amount. If it's just a freestanding property, then I would have to disclose the rates amount, and then generally how much electricity is used, like how much the electrical bill comes up to, and the water bill as well, just an average sort of figure. If the client is then happy and would like to proceed with an offer to purchase, I always have an offer with me. If they want to fill in an offer right then and there on the spot, then we just come to my car, we fill in the offer, they sign it, and then I say, okay, I'll present it to the seller right now. If the seller is home, then I'll present it to the seller immediately. But if they aren't, then I will schedule a time for after hours to present the offer. I'll present the offer to the seller, and I usually give sellers about 4 to 5 days to consider an offer once it's been presented. If the seller accepts an offer, then it's the seller's duty to nominate the transferring attorneys. Now, a buyer can suggest the transferring attorneys, but it is up to the seller to determine who will be doing the transfer attorneys. Once the offer has been signed by both parties, none of them can pull out of the deal. I had a case during lockdown where one of my clients had signed an offer to purchase for an apartment here in Beacon Bay. And now we weren't working during lockdown, and nor were the attorneys. So the deal was at a standstill. So what she had done is she had approached another agent who was selling a townhouse. And she asked if they could go and view. And the agent said yes. And she viewed. And then she called me while she was at the townhouse complex, and she said, Tuli, I'm putting in an offer on this townhouse. And I said to her, you can't. You've already put in an offer for an apartment. An offer is a legally binding document, and you cannot pull out of it once you've signed it. So I explained that to her. And in the event that a purchaser wants to pull out of a deal, they are liable for the agent's full commission. They are liable for wastage costs to the seller, because in the time that it has been sent to the attorneys, a seller could have accepted another offer. So they are liable for those wastage costs. And they're also liable for the attorney's costs, because the attorneys obviously drew up transfer documents to be signed. So I let her know about those 3 costs that she would be liable for, and she was like, okay, never mind, I'll go ahead with the deal. So if ever there's a case where a seller wants to pull out of an offer, then they're liable for those 3 costs.
Okay. Then it's something you don't want to do.
Yeah, because those 3 costs could, depending on the price of the property and the agent's commission, she was looking at paying something around 55,000 Rand. That amount of money is way more than the transfer and bond costs that she ended up paying for the attorneys. So once you have completed an offer to purchase and the seller has signed it, then it gets sent to a bank for bond application. Now, it's the agent's responsibility to send it to the different banks or to a bond originator. As I said, I like working through Kempston, because Kempston submits to all the banks, and then you get a quote to see which bank will give you the best interest rates. And so just to let you know, for a first-time home buyer, the easiest banks to work with are Standard Bank and FNB, and also Nedbank, sometimes Nedbank, depending on how good of a client you are. I know Standard Bank, for first-time home buyers, they are very good to work with, but they usually have a condition that your bond, you then have to bank through them. So you'd have to open up an account, and then the funds for your bond every month will come from the Standard Bank account.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah. So that's usually a condition that Standard Bank has. Okay. So then when you sign an offer to purchase, it's the agent's duty to give you a breakdown of how much the bond costs and the transfer costs are going to be. Now, bond costs and transfer costs are to be payable to the transferring and the bond attorneys before the property gets registered into your name. Now, it's always good to have a bit of savings before you go down the route of buying a property, because you would have to pay for these costs. But if you don't have the monies in savings, there is an option where you apply for 105% bond. Now, the 5% will cover the transfer costs and the bond costs. I've just had a deal now where the purchaser didn't have the money because she had intended on getting it from her pension fund, but then the pension fund people hadn't gotten back to their offices when the costs were needed. So then after she had been granted 100% bond, we went back to the bond originators and we'd asked them, can you please extend the bond amounts to 105% bond? That means that your bond repayments will be a little bit more because of that additional 5%. But it's not a great amount. It's around 500 to 800 rand more on your bond repayments.
Okay.
So once you have received all the quotes from the banks, it is your duty to choose which bank you'd want to go with, and obviously you'd want to go with the bank that's going to give you the best rate. Okay. Once you choose a bank and accept the quotes, you sign it and then you send it back to the bond originator. The bond originator then notifies the bank that you have accepted their quotes, and then the deal goes through to the transferring attorneys and the bond attorneys. So the process for transfer is as follows. It's the instruction received. That is when the attorneys receive the instruction for the offer. Then the next step is the rate figures requested. Now, the rate figures requested will be from the municipality. And what sometimes causes a delay is, especially with investment properties, like if the seller has got a tenant living in the property, and they sometimes don't pay their rates on time, or there's an outstanding amount of the rates. So that will be discovered once the rate figures have been requested. Then if it's an apartment or a townhouse, the levy figures will be requested. Now, the levy figures are requested through the property management company. So to give you an example, I have a few apartments for sale at the Beacon, and I've got one of them is under offer and the deal is at the attorneys. So the managing agents for the townhouse complex, the Beacon, are Merville Properties, and they are here in East London. So what needed to be done was the levy figures had to be requested. So Merville obviously gave the transferring attorneys those levy figures. Now, upon the transfer process, the purchaser needs to pay for levy figures 3 months in advance. So we've got a little bit of a delay now in the deal because the purchaser didn't make allowance for the 3-month period, even though she was told about it upon signing the offer. So we're just trying to see what we can do now in order to save the deal because we're so close to registration. So yeah, it's important for the purchaser to know that the rates and levies need to be paid for 3 months in advance before the property gets transferred into the names. And then the next step would be the transfer documents being signed by the purchaser.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, it would be the transfer documents signed by the seller.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next step would be the transfer duty submitted. So that would be when the transfer costs have been paid. Then the rates clearance certificate would be applied for and the levy certificate applied for. Then electrical certificate needs to be done. So with every property that is for sale, an inspection by an electrician needs to be done. So what the electrician does is they go in and they check for any faults in the plugs, lights, or anything. And then thereafter, they will give a certificate of compliance, which is called a COC. So a property cannot be transferred into the purchaser's name before the COC is done. And then furthermore, the wood borer needs to be done. Now, wood borer is when the inspector comes in to check if there are any pests or anything within the foundation and in the walls and gutters and all of that. So that also needs to be done before property gets transferred into the purchaser's name. So it's the wood borer inspection and it is the COC inspection. And these two inspections are paid for by the seller. Okay. And then after that, it will be lodged. So lodged means that everything has been done and can be sent to the deeds office. Now, once it gets sent to the deeds office, it takes between 3 to 7 days for the property to register into the purchaser's name. Upon registration, then the purchaser can move in. But in an instance, if the property is vacant and the purchaser wants to move in immediately before registration, there is an option where you can pay occupational rent. So the seller will say, okay, I would like X amount occupational rent, and then the purchaser will pay it into the transferring attorney's account. And then depending on how many number of days the purchaser has stayed there up to registration, then they work it out. So let's say if a purchaser stays there for 2 weeks and then the property registers, then the seller won't get the full rental amount because they only stayed there for 2 weeks before registration. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. So because they only stayed half the amount, they'll only pay half the amount, I'm assuming.
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And then once it's registered, that's when I get my money.
Jeez, and how long does that whole process from beginning to end usually take? As you say, I mean, that you have to first jump on the ball within the first 24 hours. And then what happens then? So the story.
So I would say from putting in an offer to purchase to registration, depending if there are any hiccups along the way, which there can be, and they can delay registration. If it's a cash deal, then it generally goes a bit faster. So it can take anything up to 4 to 8 weeks. But if it's bond, then it can take from around 4 weeks to 18 weeks. I had a deal last year that took 5 months to register.
Jeez,
5 months.
wow.
Yeah.
That's patience and resilience at its core.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and does the excitement keep you going? Does it keep you fresh?
It's very stressful,
Mm,
because of the hiccups that come up along the way. It's not an easy process at all,
mm-hmm,
and especially if there are tenants involved as well. I
mm,
had a one of my deals that are going to register quite soon. The tenant was absolutely impossible because my purchaser wanted to go in and take measurements for the new curtains that she's going to have made. The electrician needed to go in to do the COC. The wood borer guy needed to go in as well. And he was just absolutely impossible. He wouldn't let us in.
mm,
So it's it's tough, and a deal can go south,
mm.
yeah, it can go south at any point. It can fall through at any point. So the excitement really only starts settling in once it's lodged, because then it's at the deeds office, and then okay, it's happening. I'm gonna get my money. So once it reaches the deeds office, then you can, start celebrating.
That's good. Okay, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
Gee,
yeah,
that sounds like something else, eh? But I mean, uh, each job has its stresses, I have to say.
absolutely.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Tuli. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, we extensively covered everything. I mean, to sum it up, we went from how, I mean, the beautiful places that you're looking after, in the beautiful city of East London, the Beacon Bays, the Vincent, I think you mentioned, or Konubi, you said, sorry. And then we also,
Yes, the developments that are happening in Guinea, yeah.
exactly. And then we went from the where to go in terms of getting the money if you don't have a saved up cash, but it's always best to
Mm,
save up cash before going in
yes.
for a property
Mm,
deal. And then you took us also then through, I mean, we didn't go into much detail, but what you need to have prepared. We didn't go into the documents, but at least you know what the steps are going to go along,
mm,
and then how to
mm,
prepare yourself. And also, once you've signed the purchase offer or offer to purchase, you cannot turn
mm.
back.
Yes, there's no turning back.
Okay.
Otherwise, you'll be liable for those costs.
Those many, 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 many costs.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
no, that's a great, I think, podcast for today. And we're definitely going to have another one. And then perhaps we're going to touch on some other topics as well.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
This has been a very informative podcast. And I mean, I love the topics. I love the youthful agenda. I love the woman
Mm,
focus given the circumstances. And I love the positivity given further circumstances with the COVID-19 happening
yes,
outside.